Well, opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
You know, Wobbles, I'm kind of mad at you.
And as a reasonable man, I'm willing to do whatever's necessary to find a peaceful solution to these problems.
Welcome to Punching Up, the movie podcast where we take your favourite film, tear it down, and potentially build it up again. This podcast is an international affair, and in that it comes to you from Nottingham, England.
Hello.
And Sydney, Australia. My name's Damian, and this is
Adam Nightingale.
Adam and I have known each other for over 30 years. We met at drama school in 1990, and we're both big film lovers. So we thought it was time to sit down and start a podcast in an arena that maybe doesn't need any more, but we thought, as the famous English film critic Barry Norman used to say, and why not? Today, we'll be tackling Mel Brooks' 1974 certified classic, Young Frankenstein. Adam thinks it's not funny, and you'll find out what I think soon enough. So before we get into it, Adam, could you give us a little synopsis of the film?
Yeah, this one's a bit easier than the previous episodes, because it's basically lifting the plot of Frankenstein, which most people know about a mad scientist who assembles someone out of bits of dead bodies and stuff goes wrong. But in this instance, it's the grandson of Victor Frankenstein, the famous sort of Frankenstein from the earlier movies. And he's ashamed of his family legacy and insists that people call him Frankenstein to distance himself. He receives a will from his dead grandfather that sort of cedes him the castle and the laboratory, and he goes there and tries to resist the temptation, the genetic pull to become the old Baron, ends up sort of submitting to this temptation, reassembling the monster, and then all sorts of comedic shenanigans ensue involving his the sort of grandson of Igor, who's this sort of hilarious hunchback figure, and parodies of sequences from mainly Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, when the monster goes on the rampage, and there's big jokes about, because the monster's bigger, his willy's bigger as well. And there's a musical routine that's sort of visualized behind Damian, where in order to show that the monster's civilized, they put on a dance routine of putting on the wrist. And basically what I'm saying is, I haven't really got a plot. After a certain point, there's a succession of sketches sending up mainly the first three Frankenstein films with Boris Karloff, and it has an array of comic actors beloved to Mel Brooks doing their turns and their shtick.
Amazing.
anything you'd like to add to that?
No, that's brilliant, mate. That's brilliant. Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah.
The inception of the film. So Gene Wilder was coming to the end of filming Blazing Saddles in 1973, and he was jotting down this idea for a new Frankenstein film, the grandson of Frankenstein, as you said. And he was speaking to his agent, Mike Medavoy, who asked him if he wanted to make a film with Peter Boyle, over there, Peter Boyle, and over on Adam's side, Marty Feldman. And the reason being was that Mike Medavoy represented both of those two and Gene Wilder. So he wanted to bring together a thing. And so Gene Wilder said, okay, I've got this thing, Young Frankenstein. He sent the treatment to the agent, and the agent was into it. The agent said, would you be able to get Mel Brooks to direct it? He said that he wasn't sure Mel Brooks would do it because usually he does his own stuff. But he goes over to Mel Brooks, talks to him about it, convinces him, ends up Mel Brooks directing it and co-writing it with Gene Wilder. And funnily enough, the credits say Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks. So obviously it was Gene Wilder's idea. And yeah, they write this film, and off the back of Blazing Saddles, and I think they start filming it in spring 1974, and it is released in December 1974. So by the time they're filming Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, I don't think had even been released yet. So I think Blazing Saddles was released in 74, same year as Young Frankenstein. Yeah. So yeah, there's lots to talk about. They wanted it filmed in black and white to pay homage to the original James Whale 1931 Frankenstein and the series that you just talked about. The first company that they were originally going to film it with was Columbia, and Columbia didn't want to give them enough money, and they didn't want to do it in black and white, so they ended up taking it to Alan Ladd Jr. at 20th Century Fox, who agreed to the black and white and a bigger budget. I think Gene Wilder had a stipulation that he didn't want Mel Brooks in the film because Mel Brooks is like known to break the fourth wall, and I think Gene Wilder wanted it to be a much more serious piece, and I think the thinking behind it was the more serious it was, the funnier it would be, which kind of works. I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. I didn't think it was hilarious. The funniest in the film were the women by far. Madeline Kahn is incredible. Her first scene, that was where I laughed out loud when he's saying goodbye to her on the train. Taffeta, darling. Brilliant. It's really very funny. Her timing is ridiculous. They did a lot of improvisation apparently during the film, and the set was meant to be the funnest set ever. Everybody who talks about anybody who was on the set or was around at that time, lots of fun, lots of happiness, lots of frivolity, lots of laughs, and why not? It's a comedy that kind of came out and did really well.
Yeah, did so well that it's on the AFI list of 100 greatest comedies. Comes in, I think. Just let me check my notes.
What number was it?
I think it was. Let me have a look. It was number 13 of the 100 funniest movies of all time.
Wow.
Yeah. And is largely cited by all and sundry as one of Mel Brooks' best films and one of the best comedies ever made. And I've got an issue with it, otherwise we wouldn't have a podcast. I have to say, I do like comedy. I love comedies. I actually really, really like Mel Brooks. I always have memories of finding the film really, really funny. And then I was forced to screen it at a film night, or like a film club that I ran, which you attended one of my least successful screenings, didn't you?
It was a lot of fun. I did enjoy it.
Yeah. You came all the way over from Australia just to see me screen The Favourite to an empty room of 6 people, all of whom were friends of mine. But one of the more successful screenings we had was a Halloween screening, and I wanted to screen another horror comedy, which is never going to be on Punching Up, which is Theatre of Blood, the Vincent Price horror comedy. And the lady, wonderful lady called Rose, who I work with in my day job, wanted Young Frankenstein, and we actually had a vote. We had an online vote, and I lost by 1 vote. And I didn't vote. And Rose did. So anybody listening out there who's apathetic about voting, this is why you have to vote. It's important to vote. And so I had to screen Young Frankenstein, and I remember sitting there thinking, all right, it's going to be fun. I concede defeat. I remember sitting there and just thinking, when am I going to start laughing? And then my laughter turned to annoyance, and I'll tell you why. Gene Wilder and Marty Feldman. I agree with you. I'm a bit ambivalent on the fence about Madeline Kahn, I have to say. Terry Garr, I think, almost
wonderful.
Terry Garr is amazing. Yeah. I sort of love Terry Garr, and maybe when I was in my teens was in love with Terry Garr ever since I saw her in Tootsie. I think she steals the movie from under like Jessica Lange's feet, and Jessica Lange got the Oscar and she got the Oscar nomination. I'm sort of digressing, but I think there was so much. It's weird that Mel Gibson not Mel Gibson, that would be a completely different film. Mel Gibson's Young Frankenstein, I'd watch that. It's weird that Gene Wilder, who seemed to exert a lot of control over the film, and then in some areas ceded to Mel Brooks, was worried about the fourth wall breaking from Mel Brooks, because there's so much fourth wall breaking, mainly from Marty Feldman, who just mugs. Like, he's obviously, for those who don't know Marty Feldman, he was what can you say about Marty Feldman? I don't want to sort of just
he was an English actor that sort of came up around the time of Monty Python. He had Monty Python, Spike Milligan, a lot of those kind of surreal comedians from the 60s, English comedians that were just a little bit different and, you know, not run of the mill. And he's got these bugging out eyes. And I think that kind of, you know, propelled him into comedy stardom.
Yeah, and he was also a very, 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 very good comedy writer. So he wrote, I'm not sure if it was a Four Yorkshiremen sketch or that was the week that was class sketch. You know, I'm working class. So, you know, and I, you know, with Ronnie Corbett and John Cleese and he wrote for Round the Horn, which I love. You know, I love the radio show Round the Horn. And then he started obviously appearing in his own stuff. And then he appeared on American chat shows or sketch shows, and he did. I think Gene Wilder noticed him on a Dean Martin show, and then wanted him in the film.
Sorry. Can I ask a question? How did he progress from England to America? Like, I
think people were just looking to England, weren't they? Because it was like, you know, you got the Cambridge Footlights people, you know, out of whom came, you know. It was like Jonathan Miller, but you also got most of the Pythons. And so, you know, like all things culturally in the 60s, eyes were on England. You know, England was the place where that kind of set the mood, set the trend for a lot of what the rest of the Western world emulated culturally. And it was the same with comedy. And I think he'd done a lot on television. He had his own television show, his own sketch show. And, you know, comics watch comics, don't they? I'm always amazed when American comics know who the two Ronnies are, or Morecambe and Wise are, you know, and things like that. And it would be the same here. And Gene Wilder just knew who he was. You know, he was big in England, so they wanted to break him. And at that point, Mike Medavoy had signed him, so obviously he'd been doing something right. Marty Feldman is a funny guy, but you get the sense in this is his big Hollywood opportunity, and he goes for it too much, in my opinion. And he's encouraged by Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks absolutely encourages him to go as over the top as he can, and it's not the first time you see him, but when there's a scene where the camera pans across the brains and jars and the skulls, and I've got the image behind me. And the first time you see Marty Feldman, he opens his eyes and he goes, "I ain't got nobody," like that, and it's just a bit too much. And he continues and almost like escalates. And there's a sequence where Madeline Kahn gets out of the car. And he's just like, and he's just like sort of gnawing on her sort of fox fur, and it's just too much. It's too much, but then him and Gene Wilder seem to sort of encourage each other and escalate. And again, I'm a bit ambivalent about Gene Wilder, with one caveat which we might talk about, is that Gene Wilder's funny. I think when he's he's a neurotic, you know, his comedy persona is neurotic. There's a calm, and then there's a neurosis underneath it. And then the neurosis breaks out, and he screams his comedy in your face. And you know, I sent you a couple of clips from producers, prior to this, and there's a scene where he hyperventilates with his blanket, and the scene just goes on a bit too long. And then there's a bit where he's panicking, and he's going, I'm nervous. And then he gets water thrown in his face. He goes, no, I'm wet. And it's just. In the second half of the movie, the comedy's like screamed at you by him, and then you've got Marty Feldman mugging his face off, and it just took me out of the movie. And I was sitting there, and this is what happens to me: go from being bored to annoyed to actually angry, and then I started to question whether I like Mel Brooks at all. And from that point on. I've disliked Young Frankenstein. What I do like about the film is there are sequences that work beautifully, and I think they're the ones where they're played straight. I think Peter Boyle as the monster is brilliant. What do you think about him?
Yeah, I think he's amazing. I rewatched Frankenstein, the original, and The Bride of Frankenstein, on your recommendation. Orders. And your orders. Boris Karloff does a lot of that sort of and in fact there's a moment in Frankenstein where he's coming in the bride's room, and he sees her and she's like screaming, ah, and he goes, rawr. And it's almost like a pure comedy moment that could have easily been in Young Frankenstein.
Yeah.
So I think what Peter Boyle then does is beautifully brings the humanity out with his growls and his guttural sounds and his non-language. It's funny in Bride of Frankenstein when Boris Karloff speaks a lot. The monster speaks a lot, doesn't he? It's quite.
Yeah.
It's like
in the second half he does.
But yeah, I think he's brilliant. Peter Boyle, just in general, is a brilliant actor, and I think this is a top performance from him. The snatching of the butterflies when the violin is great. It's funny, as you said. I think the funniest bits are the bits that are played straight. Which, Madeline Kahn, she plays it straight, although she goes for the rhythm of the humor. The first not on the lips. When he goes to kiss her and not on the lips, that was when I laughed out loud for the first time. I was like, okay. Yeah. And then the next one, the hair, and then Taffeta Darling. And then when she hides away from the kiss that he blows at her. I just think it's a brilliant choice. It's just, it's so off key and funny. And, all of Terry Garr's stuff, amazing.
Yeah, she's great. And I think Peter Boyle, although he's funny, but he's utterly sincere, so he doesn't I think doesn't for a second really. I mean, there's a few, in some of the more saucy gags where about the size of his willy, and there's kind of like winking at the camera, that kind of straight to camera. Obviously, he's not playing it, but he largely plays it. And I think probably the best sketch, if you see it as a series of connected sketches, it's probably him and Gene Hackman, because Gene Hackman has this incredible, which he asked for. He really kind of campaigned to be in the film because he'd not done a comedy. And they pretty much beat for beat play out the scene in Bride of Frankenstein, where Frankenstein's being hunted, everyone hates him. They even if they don't, they scream when they see him and they run away. And then he encounters a blind man, obviously can't see what he says, and the blind man just treats him kindly and feeds him and gives him a cigar. And they sort of and the sight gags in that are very good. Like he's feeding him hot soup, pours it on his nuts, and then he's like giving him a cigar, sets his thumb on fire. But Gene Hackman plays that so beautifully. He's so sincere and creepy as well, because he's clearly kind of there's a lot of little there's not too much comedic subtext in the film, but there's a bit where and they don't really go where you think they're going to go, where the moment he starts to sort of feel Frankenstein, he goes, "Oh, you're a big brute, aren't you?" So it's like had the monster stayed there, he'd been groomed by this like old blind man, and and both of them play it dead straight, and the jokes and the situations and the sight gags, and it's sort of beautifully done. And I kind of wish the film was more that and less Buggin and Muggin from
Muggin and Muggins.
Buggin and Muggin from Gene Wilder and Marty.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Gene Wilder definitely shouts too much. I watched Blazing Saddles again as part of this, and enjoyed him in Blazing Saddles much more than I enjoyed him in this. He's obviously a quieter, more laid back character. Some of the jokes are sort of okay. And then I watched The Producers for the first time. I'd never seen The Producers. I wouldn't have seen The Producers had we not done this, and for the most part enjoyed The Producers. I really like Zero Mostel in it. I thought he was very funny, and he does a lot of breaking the fourth wall. But he's a seasoned sort of comedian, isn't he? And not that Gene Hackman wasn't, but Gene Hackman, that whole sort of
mean Gene Wilder?
Gene Wilder, I say, Gene Wilder. The nervous energy that he has, and he builds it up into this. It's almost punching down comedy, in the sense that you're kind of having a dig at like somebody who has obsessive compulsive disorder, and it just felt not funny. It's like in The Producers, where the actor comes on to play Hitler, and he does the black voice. Right. So and I just didn't like it. I thought if he'd have played it as like a hippie and doing like a California hippie, I think it would have been much funnier. But the fact that he's trying to sort of be to do a hip black sort of voice at the time.
Are you talking about
The Producers?
Oh no, but you're talking about the main guy. Was it Lucien Saint Dubois who ends up playing Hitler? Are you talking about him, or another hippie in the film?
Yeah, I'm talking about him.
I love him. I never saw him.
LSD.
I never saw him as trying to do a black voice in that.
If you listen to it, mate, it's pure. Hey, I'm hip, man. It's like that airplane sort of, hip language, and I don't know. It just didn't sit well with me. I thought like it's a choice that I don't know that is that funny,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Whereas weirdly enough, I'd always cited The Producers as my favorite Mel Brooks film. And then when I watched it, I don't think it is. I think I just really like the musical comedy in it. And I love I don't know, you probably didn't like it, but I absolutely love the Love Power audition. So for those who haven't seen The Producers, the guy that we were just talking about, I think it's played by Dick Shawn, who's, the hippie who they end up casting in a Broadway production of Hitler, Springtime for Hitler. He does this, they do a pastiche, don't they, of a 60s loving sort of mamas and papas style song. And that to this day is one of my favorite bits of musical comedy.
I think, go on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. The only reason I say that is to illustrate that one of the bits that works beautifully in Young Frankenstein is the musical comedy, the putting on the Ritz sequence, where you have, and again, that's played incredibly straight by Gene Wilder. And the joke, if you haven't seen it, is that he's trying to demonstrate to the townsfolk that Frankenstein's monster is civilized and cultured. And so they do this soft shoe shuffle routine where Wilder sings all of the words to putting on the Ritz, apart from putting on the Ritz, and then he hands it over to Frankenstein, and Frankenstein goes, "Put it on the Ritz," and it's a great joke, which they kind of milk quite a bit, but it's just beautifully staged. It's a nice musical number, and I was thinking about all the things I like about Mel Brooks, and they're all musical numbers, really. I sent you the clip. Did you watch the clip of the Inquisition? What did you think of that? This is from History of the World Part 1. And again, that's
I think I'd seen History of the World Part 1 many years ago. It's okay. Again, I'm not a huge fan of like musical numbers.
Yeah, I know.
I think they can be, it's like you say about taking you out of the film. It's a little bit too on the nose for me. Sometimes it works and sometimes it's fun, but I don't gravitate towards it.
Yeah, this is where we really disagree, because I absolutely love musical comedy. I love a really well staged musical number, and I think as a sort of self-contained, I haven't seen the History of the World Part 1 probably since the 1980s, but I watched that one clip, and I think as a self-contained sketch, I think it's brilliant. I think Mel Brooks knows his film musical grammar, so obviously I think he's lyrically so dexterous, and he has that wonderful thing I like in comedies about, I like smart stupid comedy, so I like, so obviously it's a musical routine about the Inquisition torturing Jews and forcing them to convert to Christianity, and it's just so funny and just so lyrically smart and depth, and just utterly base and crass at the same time. And then you have this, like, he's obviously had a lot of money, massive set. You got Mel Brooks legitimately mugging his face off, playing Torquemada. And then you have these sort of great visual gags, like referencing the Esther Williams swimming musical comedies, where you get all these nuns like just diving into a pool and sort of swimming in synchronization around these rabbis that they're trying to convert. It's just, I just think it's brilliant, and I, part of me thinks, why do I like, what is it about that, and what is it about everything else that Mel Brooks does on film that forms this sort of disjuncture where I like this but this jars? There's two things I think that anchor Mel Brooks and make him genuinely funny, and I do think he's a genuinely funny person, and I like him. I like everything he stands for in the industry. We can talk about that a little bit later. But I think it's discipline. I think music imposes a discipline that his sketch comedy doesn't. And he just lets his actors run wild and he encourages them. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it's just catastrophically self-indulgent. But the musical comedy, you can't improvise with a musical number. It has to, music is mathematic, it's rhythmic. You've got you've got dance. You can't do it. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I think his musical comedy is brilliant. Yeah,
he was a drummer. So
I did not know that.
Yeah. So I found that out. I watched a documentary called Mel Brooks Unwrapped, which I highly recommend you watch. Actually, it's Alan Yentob. And what he does, he goes back. He interviewed him in 1981, and then in the 90s.
Oh no, I have seen that. Yeah,
you've seen it.
But
Great.
But not for this program. I just saw it. I remember it.
I'd never come across it before, but he was talking about the rhythm of the drums, and so it makes a lot of sense that his music, and he's an incredible singer as well.
Yeah, he is.
I've seen a clip of him on Parkinson or something like that, where he got up and did a little Dean Martin, and beautiful voice. Very, very talented, as you say, knows his way around musical numbers, and then consequently I think he knows about the rhythm of comedy. Cloris Leachman, we haven't mentioned yet, and I think she's brilliant as well. From Blue Ship. I'll put in the horses every time we say a name. When she going up the stairs and she said, well, she did it, and then Mel Brooks came up to her and just said, okay, just slow down the treacherous bit. And so she does it again and gives that.
Stay close to the candles. The staircase can be treacherous.
You feel the rhythm, you feel the musicality of it. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think his Springtime for Hitler's brilliant. Like that whole piece, I thought was just amazing. So funny, and as was the end of Blazing Saddles when they're doing the when Dom DeLuise is directing.
And that's completely breaking the fourth wall in probably the most complete way I've ever seen.
And it is absolutely brilliant. Like I was fully like that whole last section is just anarchic in a punk rock way that is just you don't get to see in traditional Hollywood films at all. And so but
also I think the opening song to Blazing Saddles, which is really sly because it's Frankie Lane singing, a song that, for all intents and purposes, in any other Western would be, it would stand to open a sort of 1950s Western. But what makes it funny is this like slightly offbeat whip cracking in the background, just too loudly.
And too much as well,
slightly offbeat, and that's where the drumming comes in, because it's so perfectly mistimed. And apparently he didn't tell Frankie Lane he was going to do that. So Frankie Lane's singing what he thinks is a straight song, and then all of a sudden they put this sort of ridiculous whip. So stuff like that, and I think the best thing, and this is a great advert for artists aging. I think he did his best work in his sort of later years. So I absolutely love, from top to bottom, the Broadway adaptation of The Producers, and you what you would like about The Producers is the one song. There's only really two songs in the film. Three songs, I think, like Love Power, Springtime for Hitler, and then Prisoners of Love that plays over the credits. And of the two original songs, they completely remove that entire character, Lucien Saint Dubois. He's not in the Broadway production because it roots it too specifically in the 60s. And so they remove that song, and because there's that discipline imposed from beginning to end, because it's a musical, it's hilarious. It's just genuinely funny. And I was listening. I hadn't listened to it, and I assumed it'd be rubbish because it bombed on Broadway. He obviously followed up the incredible success of The Producers on Broadway with Young Frankenstein, and I think it's the first two songs, just called The Brain. Which again, if you know musical comedy, it's just there's nothing like a Dame from South Pacific, and he just does it's nothing like a brain. But the way he does it, it just sounds a bit crass and obvious the way I describe it, but it's just so beautifully integrated in this song. And then there's a song I Sent You, which is the Madeline Kahn character's big song called Please Don't Touch Me, which is
Megan Mullally does it, right?
I was crying. I think in that three minutes, I thought were funnier than the whole of Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, it didn't work for me. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like,
I know. Yeah.
It's,
What
it's,
what is it about musical comedy? Because we're gonna force you to do. I say we. I'm using the Royal we because only two of us. Do
yeah,
this.
you and your two mates behind you.
I've been working on you. We're gonna have to get you to do a musical.
Yeah.
You know, just you can do the whole genre if you want, but it's
I
like,
don't help, please. I don't hate all musicals. I'm just not drawn to them. I think like I like West Side Story. I remember I liked Fiddler on the Roof, although I haven't seen it for a long time. I don't know. Maybe it's just so when we were at drama school, we were on the acting course, and there was there was a slight stigma between like the actors and the musical theatres. It was like the actors felt like they're Brando, and the musical theatres were as tits and teeth. Now I don't really fully ascribe to that, subscribe or proscribe. I'll cut out the ones that don't work.
No, leave them in. Leave our flaws in.
Okay,
flaws hang out.
I don't scribe to them, but I'm just not drawn to it. I mean, I remember when we first went to drama school, I'd see the musical theatre lot sat around the piano with like somebody playing the piano, and then all of them around there singing Les Mis, and I've never seen
One Day More, weren't they? One Day More, and they just
I can't take it, mate. So. Yeah, and I've done a couple of musicals. Well, I did a panto, and I did a musical version of Phoenix and the Carpet, where I've had to sing, and it was fun. We did a little singing, a little dancing, but it's not really for me. And
we sang together in the end of year drama showcase. Do you remember that?
What did we sing?
You blocked it from your memory. See, this is turning into a therapy session, listeners, because Damian's hatred of musicals comes from PTSD as a consequence of 3 years of going on to. We had to explain. We went to Guildford School of Acting, which is the top, or was, it probably still is, I don't know, top musical theatre school, but it did have a parallel acting course. It was top musical theatre school in the country, and I think at that point, the year before we started, we both of us between us probably downgraded its status. It was like the number one accredited drama school, and then
we got there and it just plummeted.
Yeah, it just plummeted, and we were forced, part and parcel of going there is that you had to do, especially in the first 2 years, a degree of musical theatre training that was imposed on you, like singing in front of people, purgatorial, torturous dance lessons. First time. Well, actually, not the first time, but the first time I'd worn tights in public and things
public.
Like public, as in amongst your peers and things like that. And so I reckon you're mentally scarred from having. So
tell me what the song was that we sang at the end of the.
I can even. It was from. Can I sing it? I can sing it to you if you like.
Please.
No, it was. Was it from? It was from Bandwagon. And it was, do you remember, Mrs. Whifflepuffer liked to talk to Mr. Hildendorf of the fatal natal day he had, our silly Willie, or something like that. You don't remember that at all?
I don't remember that. I've definitely blocked that out. I mean, I know we did Gilbert and Sullivan, didn't we? Didn't we do some modern major general business?
Yeah, we did
at some
that.
point?
But we did this in front of agents. We did that song in front of agents.
Oh, right. I was probably hiding in the back. Just
no, it was a duet. There was just two of us on stage for like one
singing that song.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Yeah, honestly,
I have no recollection of that, mate.
Yeah, this is it. You've buried these memories.
Either you're making it up, or
I'm not making it up.
Maybe you did it with somebody else.
This is why it was me. You see, I was inoculated because my brothers. I've mentioned him previously on a podcast. My brother was a dancer from an early age, so I was brought up. And at one point, my brother was in the Sound of Music, like there was a touring production. He was in the sort of Nottingham wing of it. So at one point, I could sing you the whole of the Sound of Music from beginning to end because my brother was in it.
I've never seen the Sound of Music.
Yeah, I grew up around like ballet, musical theatre, which didn't make it any less humiliating.
When you had to do it yourself.
Well, probably more because I was like publicly reamed on many times for being like dancing like a crab. I was told in front of the rest of the class, and and then my brother joined the same drama school, and he was a really good dancer, and he was in the first year, I was in the third year, and I was just looked at with absolute contempt by dance teachers who taught my brother and looked at me. And, I just felt like Danny DeVito in Twins. When you get that, I can't remember who says it. They talk about, they talk about the perfect specimen of Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then all the crap that was left over went into you. That's what I was like as a dancer. No dancing gene.
The dancing gene missed you basically and went straight into Mark.
Yeah. And I remember, I'm going to confess, this is going to make me look ridiculous, but I remember, watching all those people in the canteen at drama school around the piano, really going for it with One Day More and just wanting to be them.
Oh God.
Not now.
Yeah, of course.
But at the time, I was so envious of them because I didn't know. And I even got like a cassette for Christmas as one of my Christmas presents of Les Mis. And, so there we go. So, but I feel that my life is before, it sort of inoculated me against a hatred of musicals. Not all of them. I hate some, but I love musical comedy, and I like stuff.
I like the songs in The Wizard of Oz. I like The Wizard of Oz. I mean, if somebody bursts out into song in some of the old films, I don't absolutely always hate it, but I haven't seen Mamma Mia. I'm not going to go and see Mamma Mia. I didn't like the Baz Luhrmann. What is it? What was that film called? Moulin Rouge.
Oh, we're going to do that. You're going to do that.
Yeah.
We have to do that as a punching up. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh God, I don't want to. See, so far we've had a bit of a theme. Like, you're the grumpy old man,
exactly,
who basically hates everything, and I'm the sort of like the scales of justice, going, "Come on, mate, be fair." So, okay, you want me? I can play the antagonist. That's totally fine.
Well, no, I just want you to get better.
Yeah,
I just want you to confront this trauma and move on. Maybe enjoy music.
Going back to Young Frankenstein, Kenneth Mars. Was very funny as Inspector Kemp, but he's basically doing a sort of wound up version of his character from The Producers, right? Playing the writer.
And again, I didn't find him that funny. I thought initially I was really amazed at his like physical comedy, because he plays the inspector who's had his arm ripped off in a previous
very Strange Lovian, mate.
Yeah, and very, very, very good physical acting, but the first two times you see it. And then by the end, and I felt like his accent was a bit just too much, and that kind of can't quite understand what he's saying.
His accent's too much in The Producers, though, as well. Gone.
No, just going to agree with you. He's not my favourite character in The Producers. I find that the bits where they go and visit him and it's like Pigeon Loft, just like that's your pee break moment, isn't it?
No, I like that. When he started to sing Deutschland über alles, like, that made me laugh. I liked his the intentionality of his character, and but him sat in the audience getting upset and trying to kill them, I didn't mind him. I thought he was quite funny. In it.
But the other thing that you put me onto, that I think makes Mel Brooks's non-musical comedy excellent, is another person to anchor him. So you, prior to making movies, obviously he was known as an incredible scriptwriter. He worked with
Sid Caesar.
Sid Caesar, alongside Neil Simon, I think,
and Woody Allen.
Woody Allen.
A bunch of them.
And then he sort of throws in with Carl Reiner, and they do these phenomenal sketches called The 2,000-Year-Old Man. So you introduced me. Well, I'd heard of it, but you pushed me in the direction of watching some sketches, which I thought were some of the funniest things I've seen Mel Brooks put his name to. Can you explain the concept of The 2,000-Year-Old Man? Yeah,
so apparently they just used to do it at parties together. And they kind of did it to just play off each other. Carl Reiner would always throw the sort of the most random kind of question, and the premise is that Mel Brooks is 2,000 years old, and so he was around 2,000 years ago, and so Carl Reiner, as a straight man from now, was asking him questions about what it was like 2,000 years ago, and he would just make up the most ridiculous stuff, and obviously the more ridiculous the question, the better the comedy, because like Carl Reiner was saying that with comedians, when you push them into corners, they come out with their best stuff. When they're and I think that they just carried on working it, and then they were told you might as well put it onto a record, you might as well, and I think they were a bit worried about that once they put it down, it would sort of lose its edge and lose its sort
Yeah.
of freedom. I think they put it on a record that Cary Grant heard and really liked, and apparently played the Queen Mother at some point. I don't know if that's true. Yeah. And apparently she really liked it. Again, this Mel Brooks told that story. Yeah, and it's very funny, The 2,000-Year-Old Man.
And I think the reason it works is because Brooks has someone to anchor him. So Carl Reiner's a funny guy, you know, for those who don't know, went on to achieve his greatest fame directing a lot of Steve Martin's earlier best comedies, you know, like The Man with Two Brains and The Jerk, and, you know, things like that, and All of Me.
Don't know if I'm a big Steve Martin fan, by the way.
Well, we can do Steve Martin then later on, can't
Please,
we? You got to be careful, like
vocalizing
what you don't like.
I love Steve Martin. We definitely can't do him.
But yeah, and he's the father of Rob Reiner. You know, obviously directed like
Stand By Me.
Stand By Me, and his Spinal Tap, Misery, The Princess Bride. This run of When Harry Met Sally, this run of incredible sort of films in the 80s and early 90s. And he acts like, because I wonder if like the creators of Saturday Night Live's Weekend Report watch this, because it's the same dynamic where you got someone like Seth Meyers or Michael Che, who are brilliant comic writers, but they elect to be the straight person to anchor an outrageous interview subject. And that's why it works, again, because it's discipline. There's a discipline imposed on Mel Brooks. And I listened to a routine, and then I watched them do it live, or rather recording of them do it live. And the interesting thing is it's funnier when you listen to it, because what you've got when you watch it is all of Mel Brooks's hand comedies, physical kind of, you know, sort of comedy, which distracts. Is mugging, which distracts from the verbal comedy. And so
I agree.
But when you're just listening to them, you have, you know, another comic earthing a more anarchic, chaotic comic personality.
Yeah.
And what you have is this classic bit of comedy. And so I have to say, no, I like Mel Brooks enormously, and I always want to like his movies more than I do. And I love his musical comedy. I love his theatre work. I like him as a man, and as a producer, he's, you know, he's sort of basically launched or elevated some very interesting careers, because he produced The Elephant Man. He produced The Fly, David Cronenberg's The Fly. You know, those were his two big sort of landmark movies, and then lots of kind of probably not quite as interesting, but sort of creative films that may not have got the green light had he not thrown his money and his weight behind it. And I like the fact that he's a long-time married man. You know, that his relationship with Anne Bancroft's very moving.
It's beautiful.
Or did you talk about musical comedy? Did you see? I didn't send you the clip because I thought I just drowned you in musical comedy. Otherwise, there's. I
would have cancelled the podcast, mate. I was like,
was
one more. If he sends me one more, mate, it's over.
The comedy musical straw that broke the song and dance camel's back, if that makes any kind of sense.
Absolutely.
And it was because he did a remake of the Ernst Lubitsch comedy To Be or Not to Be, which I remember seeing at the cinema. My teens not finding very.
You sent it me, the Hitler rap.
Oh no, not the rap. That was to promote it.
Okay.
But there's actually a scene in the film where him and Anne Bancroft sing "Sweet Georgie Brown" in Polish. That's the joke, but they do it perfectly, and it's fine in the film. But then there's a kind of I'm not sure what program it's from. It's like an audience with Mel Brooks, and they're considerably older. Yes, Anne Bancroft still looking absolutely beautiful in her sort of probably late 60s, and Mel Brooks calls her out of the audience. Obviously set up. He calls her out of the audience, and they do the routine again as an old married couple, and it's technically brilliant and really sweet and moving. You know, because they've and I like the child they've raised. I like Max Brooks, you know, author of World War Z. If you ever see an interview with him, he's a fascinating guy, really interesting guy. He had a very, very, very kind of unique education because he had dyslexia when it wasn't being diagnosed. And Anne Bancroft took time off from a film career just to basically sort of home educate him, using a lot of what would have been at the time sort of slightly unorthodox education philosophies when dyslexia wasn't being properly recognized, to raise her son. And he's gone on to become, I think, a brilliant, brilliant novelist. I love I love his Bigfoot novel, Dissolution. I I like the offshoots of World War Z. I've yet to read one, but he's a fascinating guy. Seems like a grounded, solid, incredibly talented guy raised by two Hollywood parents who've stayed together. You know, so as a man, I love and respect as a generally creative person. It's just when he writes and directs his own movies from beginning to end, there's always these disconnects with the shouty, undisciplined, unruly. Just
I like
encouraging his comedy performers to greater levels of excess that just grates with me.
I like that. I think that's fine. It doesn't necessarily make me laugh.
Well, it's a bit of a problem with the comedy, though, don't you think?
Well, those bits don't necessarily make me laugh. But again, we're going back to like taste. When I say I'm happy it's out there, just because I don't find it funny, but lots of people do, great. It's giving lots of people joy, you know, like. And what I do like about it, specifically what I like about Young Frankenstein is the look of it. I think.
Gerald
Hirschfeld, the cinematographer, lights it incredibly. You know.
Absolutely.
It looks like the 1930s. It's got the same feel, and yet it's been made, 40 years later. Let's talk quickly about Kenneth Strickfaden, who did the props that were just left in his garage. And I don't know how Mel Brooks found out and Gene Wilder found out about it, but they asked him if if they could use it. And then they recreated the same laboratory in Young Frankenstein that was in the 40 years later. And then
literally the same props, didn't they? Yeah. And he wasn't, did you forgive me if you just mentioned it, but he wasn't credited, was he, on the original?
That's what I was just about to say. He wasn't credited in the original. So they credited him in this, which was fantastic.
Again, which talks about Mel Brooks' integrity and loyalty, and he's very loyal to his actors, and I agree. I think I have to say it's probably the most beautiful looking comedy I've ever seen. I think it's just visually amazing. Especially like we did. You watch the James Whale movies, and then you watch his movie back to back. James Whale's a very sly, very very witty man. So there's a lot, not so much in the first one, but there's a lot of, I think, deliberate. There's a little bit of unintentional humor. But there's a lot of deliberate humor, very waspish humor.
What's the name? The maid woman, like she's out of a Carry On movie.
Yeah, she's awful. But Dr. Pretorius, played by Ernest Thesiger, is, I think, a phenomenal. I mean, he's genuinely evil, genuinely sinister, but he's really funny. And deliberately so. The sequences with Dr. Pretorius in The Bride of Frankenstein almost render Young Frankenstein being irrelevant because he's so funny, he's so dry, he's so waspish, and all of that's deliberate. The whole Lafitte thing. I only drink gin. It's my only weakness, and then I only smoke cigars.
It's my only weakness. His reputation in the English. I'm just reading a biography of John Gielgud, and he turns up in that, and he was one of the few like flamboyantly open gay actors in that period, and they just push that. I think just that it's a real sense-abating performance, in that he is just this incredibly like sort of waspish gay character in the middle of this sort of horror movie, and he is brilliant. He's graduated to being my favorite mad scientist in any film, and I think his scenes. I mean, he plays it perfectly because he's a authentic villain, genuinely sinister, and incredibly funny. And I think the scene with him and Boris Karloff in the crypt is funny. It's just genuinely funny, and it's just a funny exchange between the two of them. The fact that he doesn't know he's down there, doesn't know the monster's down there. He turns up, sees the monster, just ever so matter of factly, just adjusts and just talks to the monster as if he's. And it's just, you'd have to watch for the listeners or the viewers, if you haven't seen it. I mean, find that clip on YouTube or just watch the film. And I think that's arguably funnier in an enduring way than most of the stuff in Young Frankenstein. What do you think? Yeah, I don't know that I laughed out loud at the Pretorius bits. I liked his performance. It was obviously didn't feel as pushed comedically. But yeah, as you said, I think that playing it straight, yes, it felt like it kind of could have come out of Young Frankenstein. When I first saw Young Frankenstein, I was giving it a 3 out of 5, but I think I might sort of push that to like 3.5 now. But you know, like I said, the things that I enjoyed most were Madeline Kahn, Cloris Leachman, and the amazing Terry Garr. So Terry Garr's mother was the costume designer for Young Frankenstein, and Terry Garr asked her if there was anything in Young Frankenstein for her. She said, "Oh well, there's Elizabeth, the wife." So they're having auditions. They go down to she goes down to a cattle call audition that apparently Farrah Fawcett's at. Goes in, auditions for Elizabeth, and they say, "Well, you're great, but Madeline Kahn's going to be playing Elizabeth." They said, "So if you can come back tomorrow with a German accent, we will consider you for the Inga, the laboratory assistant." And so she was working on something where the makeup lady was German, a woman Renata.
It was the Cher show.
That's right. Yeah. Was it the Sonny and Cher show?
Yeah, the Sonny and Cher.
Yeah. And so she just bust off a German accent and roll in the hay. And they gave her the part straight away. And I think it's an amazing casting. By far, the best thing in Young Frankenstein is Terry Garr.
I absolutely agree with you, and responsible for the best joke and the cheapest joke in Young Frankenstein.
It's the way she delivers it, mate.
What knockers!
Oh, thank you, Doctor.
That probably says more about me and makes a case for the film and against me, but my favorite
and also
joke,
Young Frankenstein musical that you sent me about Show Me Your Tits or whatever. Again, that's another. That was the one that you found funniest,
that's clever, stupid. The fact that you have this like escalating chorus number where they just say tits over and over and over again is really funny. So I don't know. You might win this one. I did watch it again. We normally do this. I forgot to say I watched it again, obviously. And Damian, I found it a little bit funnier than I did the first time, and less annoying. It's always
the case, isn't it?
It's always the case. It won't always be the case, but in this case, it is the case.
Yeah.
I rest my case.
I wonder if see what I found so far. I mean, the first two films, 2001 Raging Bull, they were I like both of them. This one I was kind of ambivalent about. But what I find is that when I then research anything about the films, I just start to warm to them more. Like I know, like one of my things, we've talked about this before, I'm not going to harp on about it, but one of my things is it takes an army to make a film, and it's just easy for a critic just go, "Oh, I didn't like that. It was boring, or it was this, or it was that." And it's for like, me, when you think about, what it takes to make a film, like you've got to kind of at least take a little, which we have been doing anyway. It's not like,
I've never, I've conceded. It's always been a qualified dislike. We'll get to movies at some point that I actively can't stand from top to bottom. I want us to do. Although I don't want to watch it, we're going to do something on at some point on Alejandro Jodorowsky. We can put El Topo on the Holy Mountain, and
I don't think I've seen El Topo.
We might do the Holy Mountain because that's fresher in my memory. But I don't like.
Yeah, let's save that for a while, mate. Save that for season 3 or something.
Yeah, season 3. Just a final word about Gene Wilder. I've spoke ill of Gene Wilder. I have to say, I have met Gene Wilder, and I saw him on stage. When he did a Neil Simon comedy, Laughter, I think it was on the 23rd Floor, which is all about Neil Simon's time in the writer's room, working for Sid Caesar. And Gene Wilder plays a version of Sid Caesar. And I have to say, it was one of the best experiences in the theatre I've ever had. He was astonishing on stage and largely quiet, I think. So all the chaos and the mugging, very good mugging, it has to be said, was done by all the character actors playing surrogates of like Mel Brooks, Neil Simon, I think Carl Reiner and Woody Allen. And he was just this kind of graceful, deranged sort of comedy swan in the middle of it all. And so just to say something nice. And I was just on stage door at the time. It was on in Richmond Theatre where I was working before it transferred to the West End. And I just had to pass on a message from his wife. So I had a really, really boring, mundane conversation that lasted probably 30 seconds with Gene Wilder, and he was perfectly nice. So there we go. So there we go. Let's just end on a grace note with Gene. I've just ended the episode. I'm sorry. Is that okay to just wind it up now?
Yeah, it's
anything
fine.
else you want to say?
It's fine.
and set up the next episode.
Yeah, let's set up the next episode.
Yeah. So the next episode is my favorite genre, which I'm gonna pick a film out of my favorite genre. Damian, what is my favorite genre of all genres?
Western genre, the genre of the Western.
I love the Western genre, and I'm going to pick a titan of the Western genre to have a pop at, and then after this, you have to like
it's
be
mine.
the bad guy. You've got to be the bad cop after this because
I'm going to retire after the next episode, mate.
Well, no one's watching this anyway, so it doesn't matter. And also, I've noticed we haven't put any contact details where people can like send me their hate.
Yeah, we should definitely start saying like, if you like it, please subscribe. Give us good reviews on Apple and Spotify and all those kind of things, and tell your mates about it.
Yeah.
Anybody else is into films.
And put my personal email address so I get.
It's all going to you, mate.
Yeah. But the film, I think this will send ripples of outrage to the Western loving community. The film that I've chosen to punch up at is Once Upon a Time in the West. So, shall we say goodbye to our listeners and viewers?
I think so. Yeah. Until the next time, from Sydney, Australia.
From Nottingham, England. Oh, sorry. I just stepped on your piece there.
That's
From
okay.
Nottingham, England. An apology to Damian and a goodbye. Goodbye.
Until the next time.
Until the next time. No, you have the last word. Give us another till next time.
Till next time. Peace.